Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the Holistic Academy podcast, where we love to untangle the labyrinth of our minds and bodies and discuss ancient wisdom with cutting edge science so that we can help you learn the knowledge to live healthy, happy, and holistic lives. Last week, we talked all about friendships, but today we're going to dive into family and especially the topic of healing the father and mother wound. We will explore what these terms mean and how our childhood patterns shape adult relationships. We'll look at our attachment styles and also how to reprogram and reparent ourselves.
Yeah, sounds a very deep podcast, and I think you are describing just the whole year of therapy that I had last year. So it's a lot to unpack during this episode, and we are going to be challenged with the different settings that we are facing when we are a child and how we respond and how many of those messages are ingrained within us and then they show up when we are adults.
Absolutely. I think it's something that affects every person because we all have a relationship to our mothers and fathers, whether it's a good one or perhaps not so good one. But let's clarify the terms then for our listeners today. The mother wound, this is a term that's not actually about our actual mother. It's about our relationship to a nurturing, comforting, and emotional sense of safety that often we get from our mothers. But it shows up in our adult life as a difficulty in self soothing, perhaps feeling unworthy of having care and constantly giving to others in order to feel loved. So I'm definitely someone who has that wound of being a people pleaser too, and often looking to others. So I'm definitely still back on my self-love journey, trying to relearn and reparent myself as well. So I've been affected by both my father wound and my mother wound growing up. And I think it's important. They might only affect us in subtle ways and some ways in deeper ways, but it will be really cool to clarify what would be the core mother wounds that come up about when we learn to relate and care and how we relate with our emotions and our self-worth, but also then we'll dive into also the core wounds of our father. So the first core wound of our mother is the wound of nurturance. This means that you feel that your needs are too much. And this is often when emotional or physical care was inconsistent, overwhelming, or absent. This often shows up as difficulty receiving support, overgiving, as I said, and feeling guilty for needing rest or reassurance. So you need to know that your needs are not too much, but we also need to learn to give them to ourselves too. The second wound is the wound of emotional safety. It's not safe to feel. This is when emotions were dismissed, ignored, or punished. I know my mum sometimes said that she didn't know what to do with my emotions. So again, that's quite a difficult experience to go through, having that unawareness or dismissal of not knowing how to meet your child's needs and not being able to hold that safe space for me just to feel it out anyway. But now as an adult, I'm learning and learning to not dismiss my emotions, to face them and to hold space for them and know that they might not be pleasant, but they're only uncomfortable. You know, they're not toxic or terrible feelings. They're only uncomfortable. But over life, I can relate to this. I was not safe to feel, and so I grew up with emotional numbing. I wasn't able to feel as much when I grew older. I have a big tendency of people pleasing, as I said, and it often leads into having anxiety around vulnerability. So, what about the other two core wounds of the mother, David?
Well, we are arriving to the third core wound, and is the wound of worthiness, which is love must be earned. And this falls exactly or hits home with me because it's when love felt conditional based on behavior, performance, or mood, and this often creates perfectionism, self criticism, or fear of being a burden. I think that I have experienced kind of those things, and in my case, I think that I developed this OCD, obsession compulsive disorder, in certain things where I really think that I have to take care of everything and that I have to be the one that sustains my brother, my mom, and pretty much everyone. And sometimes it's exhausting, this kind of journey, because you feel that if you don't do something, you are not worthy. And you relate this kind of behavior with what people should appreciate of you. So it's very common as well. And the fourth wound is the wound of attunement. No one really sees me. And when the caregiver couldn't mirror or recognize the child's inner world, this shows up as identity confusion, self doubt, or constantly looking outside yourself for validation. And this wound is also very common in people, because I think that this is the kind of personality that always want to attract the attention of people, and they always want to be the popular girl or boy in the parties, and they always are looking for things to show up or show off. And that's when they are constantly being, uh, let's say, anxious about validation, posting a lot of things. I really relate this to many women that go to the gym and they just record themselves doing the exercise and posting the things, and just waiting to see how many people like their videos instead of focusing on what they are doing in the gym.
I think it's an important thing you bring up because, yeah, that wound of attunement, did your parents really see you for who you are? If they haven't, then yeah, you're feeling confused and lost and you're begging for this approval or just validation and care through, like you say, going to the gym or eating healthy, which are still are like worthy and great things to do, I guess. But it's just they're seeking the needs from others that weren't met in their childhood. And the sad reality is no one can meet that in our reality. No one can. The only person who can is yourself. So again, no one at the gym or no one on TikTok or Instagram or even your partner can validate you. It has to be yourself. And this is what we'll be uncovering more in this amazing discussion today. I think it's also important now to look at the father wound. Again, this is not necessarily your actual father, but it shows up in how we related as a child to that male figure in our lives. And often that's how we relate to protection, this need for approval, having stability, and this secure attachment as well, and feeling security. So as a wound, and this is something that I suffered, I think, more in my family, the father wound, is it's going to look like chasing achievement to feel worthy. I've got 3 degrees, so that shows a bit of that. It shows up as struggling to trust others. Maybe that's because I couldn't trust my father as much, and also having sort of abandonment issues as well in close relationships. So feeling like almost worried when people aren't showing up for you in the right way, or feeling like you're abandoned or neglected if people aren't present for you in a certain way. So all of this is really important because this obviously projects out into our current friendships and relationships. Little did we realize. So again, the 4 core father wounds are about how we learn to relate to safety, approval, and the outside world. So the first one we're going to look at is that wound of approval. And this came up in another podcast I was listening to in Father Wounds. And it's this idea that I'm only valuable when I perform. And this is quite often known to be the type of love given from a father is conditional love, and the mother's seen as more unconditional. But it doesn't mean to say that it also has an impact when things are conditional and transactional, and we can learn as well to find unconditional loving relationships. But yes, I'm only valuable when I perform. This was when approval was conditional, absent, or unpredictable. It drove my achievement, people pleasing, and fear of disappointing others. The only thing I wanted to do in my life was make my dad proud, make him feel happy, make him feel grateful that he had such an amazing daughter in his life. And for me, that wasn't a reality. So, in fact, I kept on performing more and more and more to try and earn that. But in the same way, I lost myself. So, it's really important to have awareness about how our familial relationships have affected us and how we can break these cycles going forward in our lives. And the second wound, core wound of a father, is the wound of safety and protection. And for me, that and others, it manifests as I have to handle everything alone. I
Mm.
also have the wound of the eldest child. So my dad also conditioned me to be the first child, the provider and the protector of the family as well. So this was almost an imprint that's been passed down that I also need
Mm.
to protect. But having to handle everything alone, it's been something I always deal with my problems alone. And only in the last year, when I hit rock bottom, I finally have learned to reach out to people, to reach out for friends. And it grows your emotional resilience when things are difficult and you definitely feel more in your center and grounded. But when you don't have safety and protection, that could manifest in so many ways growing up. It could be like emotional, physical absence from your father. My dad was physically present with me, but wasn't emotionally available. Shows up as inconsistency or instability. And later in life as well, that grows your hyper independence. So a bit like me and the elder child, I just want to be so independent, handle everything on my own. Manifests as like anxiety in our body and difficulty trusting people. So yeah, that's definitely something that I have, and it's difficult to also trust support and trust others that they can do it as well. Feel like I just know I have to handle everything and it's on me. So it's great uncovering these father wounds too, don't you think, David?
It is, and also I think I relate to many of these. I think also I have this father wound, let's say deeper than the mother, let's say. But I now that we are arriving to these four core father wounds, the third one is the wound of guidance and direction. And I don't know how to lead myself. That would be the phrase. I don't know where is my direction or where am I going. When structure, mentorship, or encouragement was missing or over controlling, this can show up as indecision, imposter syndrome, or rebellion against authority. And I think I have some of those too, because I don't like authority. I really struggle with the, let's say, common jobs. That's why I have my own business. I'm lucky of that, to have it, and I'm lucky that I can do what I love. But I struggled while I was in a job now. So it is also very important that we understand where it comes from and that we, let's say, try to fix it and try to be at peace with it. And the fourth wound is the wound of presence. People leave. And when the father figure was emotionally unavailable, distracted, or absent, this often creates abandonment fears, avoidant attachment, or difficulty staying emotionally engaged in relationships. And this one, it's also very, very, let's say, relatable as well, because I have this avoidant attachment many times present in my relationships. It's difficult for me to, uh, let's say, have these intimacy moments sometimes and open up with people, trust people that they are going to just be with me and stay, even if I am emotionally triggered, let's say, and the fear of engagement as well. No, because seeing that my parents had a marriage where they didn't function and they stayed together, so make me not trust in the institution of marriage. So I think it's extremely important that we heal those wounds.
Wow, yeah. I'm also just letting it all sink in, and thanks for your vulnerability, David, and your generous share too. Yeah, it goes deep, doesn't it? All these different patterns, and you can see clearly now as an adult, if we find our attachment styles either anxious, avoidant, disorganized, or secure, we can really see how in relationships they stop us from being our true, authentic self and fully trusting our partner or fully being there and present. And just like me, I feel like I have to do everything alone. So that might create distance or
Mm.
a feeling of rejection when people aren't involved in what's going on in my life. But yeah, it definitely runs deep. And so it's important to acknowledge, though, that these wounds aren't about whose fault it is and what happened in our childhood and our parents. But it's important in this podcast as well that we forgive them and whatever they've done, but we learn how their behaviors impacted us because that awareness is like the light bulb moment, I guess, for a lot of them. And once we name them and what's happened to us, we can finally begin meeting the needs on our own as an adult. And we don't need anyone else. So it's definitely a journey, and I can see myself chipping away working on some of those, but I definitely need to dive deeper and dig deeper into those different unmet needs and explore how I can give them to myself so I can have healthy interdependent relationships growing up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that when you do this hard work, that you go into these deep layers, we are just mentioning here the surface of these wounds, and we are being open and vulnerable to what happened to us. But doing the work is extremely painful, and I understand that many people are afraid to go deep into these topics. But I can speak from experience that when you do it, you let go a very high weight from your life and you feel a lot lighter, and things starts moving in the direction that you should be moving as well. No, so let's dive deep into the ancestral echo now, and what ancient cultures taught about the mother and father relationships.
Mm. Oh, thanks, David. So, yes, ancient cultures. Well, when they spoke of family wounds, they didn't really see them actually as a personal failure. They saw them as an inheritance. So something you were inherited by. But and this doesn't mean like you've been inherited the disorganized gene. It's much more in that, much more than that, because ancient civilizations, the way that they understood emotional pain was that something, it wasn't personal, but it moved through families. It wasn't something that began with one individual. What modern psychology might now call trauma or attachment patterns, the ancients understood this as lineage. So there was an unfinished business passed down through your lineage, through the generations, until someone in that lineage became conscious enough to interrupt it. And these are sometimes seen as the cycle breakers, and we're going to come on to talk about that now.
Yeah, I really agree with that, that there has to be a stop sign at any point in a generation so that this damage stops and doesn't leads into the future generations. And I think we are in that moment right now because we have a lot of tools to use them. So in ancient cultures, the mother and the father were not just people, they were symbols. The mother represented the first world we ever knew, nourishment, safety, emotional belonging. In many traditions, a disrupted bond with the mother wasn't framed as emotional neglect. It was seen as a rupture in one's sense of being at home in life. If a mother struggled to nurture, it was assumed she herself had not been nurtured, and her limitations were seen as echoes of what she never received. The wound was cyclical and not a moral failing.
Mm. I think it's quite a interesting perspective to see that it didn't just come from my mother, but it was her mother before her and her mother before that, and all the mothers, and the same with the fathers as well. So it is
Mhm.
a repeated pattern. And yeah, it just takes one individual in their family lineage to say, stop, this isn't happening anymore. And that might be all it takes, but it is such hard work. And when it's something that you've always ever known and it runs so deep in your into your DNA and even your epigenetics, the little extra bits of your DNA and codes,
Mm.
when it runs so deep, it is such a powerful journey to recode yourself, reparent yourself, and then have this new DNA imprint for the rest of your lineage growing up. So, on the other hand, the father, as a symbol in these ancient cultures, they were a symbol of protection and structure and initiation into the world beyond the family. So, almost like the guide as you enter to society. In
Mm.
ancient Greek and Roman thought, the father's role was to anchor the child, to offer guidance, approval, and the sense of direction. But when their presence was absent, harsh, or inconsistent, the child was believed to grow up disconnected from themselves, searching externally for safety or validation. If we haven't met that safety from our father growing up, we'll be constantly seeking it ever more when we're older. And you can also see some women and men like constantly getting into relationships one after the next. And this is because they're searching for that external validation of love, of affection, of worthiness. And that's only because they can't give it to themselves. But as
Mm.
we will learn growing up, these create toxic habits and behaviors. And at some point, we won't want to deal with them anymore. And we'll either end the relationship or go to therapy or do both because it's time for that pattern stops and subsides and we can see what's really running in our lives and how to make sure that the programs that we are running are serving us. So,
Mhm.
growing up through this experience, you either go through it or you become aware, but you also probably have a lot of hate towards your parent for doing it, which is absolutely natural. But over that, we need to see that the blame isn't solely on the parent, it's also on our lineage and also what's happened in our lineage. As many ancient societies, they've lived through war, famine, displacement, and rigid survival roles. So fathers often weren't able to be there just because of the circumstances. It was nothing that they wanted for their family. It was just the way that society needed them to show up. So fathers could not be emotionally there for their children, not because they're uncaring, but because they were demanded in these capacities out in the workforce or even as a soldier. And we can see as well, even as a man in society, they also have a lot of pressures of what it's like to be a man and provide. And that could also mean that they don't spend as much time at home because they're trying to earn more. Mothers as well, they also have carried this emotional weight of households all their life. So that can come out in how they parent. They hold a lot of unprocessed grief, especially when their partners went away or were in difficult situations. Often parents aren't try not to express grief to their kids, so it all just gets stuck inside and grows and flows in their body. And unfortunately, even if they think that might be the best thing, it does slowly project out onto their kids, onto their relationships. So whether you're a mother or a father, or just an adult. We need to process this grief so that we can not hold what our families have been holding on through their generations, but can finally process, heal, and grow. So it's important to realize that our parents aren't all bad. These are just survival mechanisms that were passed down to us, passed down to them, and then to us. What about
Yeah.
Western traditions, David?
Yeah, I agree that there is level of deepness that we can arrive with our parents and ask them also how their parents and their grandparents were. And that's when we understand the deep wounds that come from these generations. So, in Eastern traditions, these patterns were understood as karma or samskaras, and emotional imprints carried across generations. What remained unconscious in one generation was destined to repeat in the next. Healing then was not about rejecting one's parents, but about completing what they could not. And this is why an ancestral healing was considered sacred work. To heal yourself was to heal the lineage forward and backward 7 generations. And that's just also now known as epigenetics, because epigenetics talks about these 7 generations that can be impacted. So imagine if you do the work to heal emotionally for yourself, you are healing the next 7 generations in your lineage. So if you resonate and feel like you are becoming a cycle breaker, this is not an act of rebellion, but an act of responsibility and an act of deep love for the future human beings that are going to habitate this world.
Absolutely. But I have to say, being a cycle breaker can also be exhausting work, but
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. And so, even, you might be thinking that you're also breaking some really big things for your family, but you don't realize what big things your mother also broke in her cycle and her mother before that. So maybe they have also been doing different work and different inner healing that we haven't seen. But it feels really big and heavy when we in our generation are also doing a lot of the work. I like what
Mm.
you said about David, when you ask your mother or your grandmother or anyone else in your family questions about themselves and their relationships, you get a lot more insight into how your lineage was designed and created. And I think that's such powerful insight, especially when you want to break some of these cycles. But we
Yeah.
need to definitely acknowledge that our parents aren't just the source of our wounds. And like with this ancestral wisdom, that they are also wounded children shaped by histories we may never fully know.
Mhm.
So this ancient message is so clear. We're shaped by our lineage, but we're not owned by it, and therefore we can change it. And I think that's where this episode's been so important, because it's given us the awareness, and that awareness is the moment where our inheritance becomes a choice. Do we want to continue with that pattern? Do we want to break it and heal it? When you heal that mother and father wound within you, you're not erasing all the past, though. It's still a memory there, but you're actually just bringing it to rest and able to live more harmoniously in alignment and following this path of human existence that brings you that healthy, happy, holistic, vibrant life that we all deserve. I'm always thinking, why does this keep happening to me? And what's going on? Is it me or outside of myself? And I'd love to blame the universe or everything else, but a lot of the times it is me. So, if anything, I need to go back into me, back into my family patterns, back into my childhood, and look at what things really affected me, and also how to forgive my parents for their own wounds, because they did not know any better at their time. And I hope, did their best that they could with the right intentions, most of them. So let's shift gear. We've talked a bit about this ancient knowledge and wisdom and ideas of the father and mother wound and lineages, but I'd love to hear more about the science. So, what does the science have to say?
Well, just to make an analogy of everything that we have spoken about the father and the mother wound and relating that to the deep science that we know right now, eh, everything that we heal emotionally, it's very, very similar to what we can heal physically. And if in epigenetics, if you nurture yourself, eat better, do exercise, sleep well, and then have these peaceful moments to have self care and do the 5 pillars of health, what you are doing is that you are cleaning your genes. When you emotionally heal, what you are doing is that you are emotionally healing generations also, and the imprint that can be similar to our genes, our emotional genes. And we are healing and letting these genes to be cleaned for the future, to be, let's say, like a new notebook that it's gonna be imprinted with much better and healthier conscious behaviors. So that's what we can do as a closure of these ideas. And now the idea of mother and father wounds isn't just a single clinical diagnosis, it's a synthesis drawn from the attachment theory, development psychology, and trauma research. These patterns show up again and again across different models, even if they are named differently. What the research shows is that adults appear to often subconsciously recreate early dynamics, seeking the validation they missed from a father or the nurturing they missed from a mother in our romantic partners. And quite often, we aren't just dating a new person. We are often trying to resolve an old story, and this is known as the attachment story.
Yeah, the attachment story and the attachment theory.
We are
Oh, it's a big one, isn't it? But it's so worth diving into again. And I'm sure people have, skimmed the surface of what this means to them, but it's definitely worthwhile digging deep. It can
Mhm.
bring so much more understanding to ourselves and each other. As our relationship with our parents, it's true, it acts as the original template for how we interpret life. And life involves safety, love, and connection. And that is reflected in all our relationships when we grow into adulthood. So I think, yeah, parenting is a really difficult journey, but it's really important as well. The messages that we give to our children around concepts of love, connection, respect, and care, and also talk about maybe these abstract concepts that they don't always talk about in school. What is a loving relationship and a non-loving relationship? And what's a good friendship and a bad friendship? And what makes you feel safe and makes you feel belong and what doesn't? And how can we also celebrate your uniqueness and set boundaries if people don't respect you and your values? And how do you feel secure in yourself? So these are such important concepts that are our main concept today with the attachment theory is looking at how these early relationships shape the way we are connecting, trusting, and feeling safe with others and ourselves.
Yeah. And to talk more about this, developed by psychiatrist John Bowlby and expanded by psychologist Mary Ainsworth, the theory suggests that as children, we are biologically wired to seek closeness to caregivers for safety and survival, as we can't do it by ourselves. When that need is met consistently, we learn that the world is safe and that we are worthy of care. When it isn't, we learn to adapt. And those adaptations don't disappear in adulthood, they become our attachment style.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. There are four attachment styles. Obviously, in this podcast episode, we're just gonna go through them surface level, but if there's anything that resonates, I really invite you and encourage you to dig a bit deeper and research more about your attachment style. The four main styles are secure, securely attached, your anxious attachment, insecure attachment, and also disorganized. So we're going to have a look at those.
Okay, so for secure attachment, securely attached children experience caregivers who were generally consistent and responsive. As adults, this often looks like comfort with intimacy and independence, the ability to communicate needs, emotional regulation during conflict. Secure attachment isn't about having perfect parents, it's about good enough responsiveness. So most of the time, they are present and show up in the way the child needs, which is many times challenging in previous generations. And nowadays, we are seeing it more, although we can fall into the category of giving too much. So attachment develops when care was inconsistent, sometimes available, sometimes not. And as adult, this can show up as fear of abandonment, hypervigilance in relationships, seeking reassurance or closeness to feel safe, and at its core, anxious attachment is a nervous system that learned connection is unpredictable.
Mhm. That's definitely sounding like a lot of my relationships. So thank you for highlighting that, David. I also didn't say the avoidant attachment style. I think I called it insecure. So that's my bad. But yes, avoidant attachment is one of the other attachment styles. This is a big one that I also suffer with in my life and relationships. But it's definitely one to deeply uncover, as it doesn't always lead us on the most happiest path. And the more we understand this, the more we can feel more connected and more whole and loved and in those divine relationships that we truly deserve and want to have. So, avoidant attachment forms when caregivers were emotionally distant, dismissive, or overwhelmed. And so, as adults, this can look as discomfort with vulnerability, so not sharing your emotions with your partner. There's strong independence or emotional withdrawal from your partner. So often, sometimes your partner will walk out on you when you're trying to explain your emotions or get really defensive, and they also then minimize your needs or emotions. So I've had this where I'm trying to talk about my feelings, but it's been about it turns into and twists into someone else's emotions and needs, or they're defensive and then they've left their room, and then again I feel more neglected, and oh, these cycles just all play out and out and again and again and again. So for an avoidant, you really feel that relying on others isn't safe, and it's definitely something to acknowledge and realize. If you're an avoidant, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. It's survival, but we can be the cycle breakers and we can learn to have more securely attached relationships in the future. So the last one is the disorganized attachment style, and this occurs when the caregiver is both a source of comfort but also of fear. So you might have a really loving parent, but they also discipline you very harshly. This could be a little bit like us growing up in schools with teachers back in the day when they were comforting and helped us learn, but then whipped us or shouted at us or slammed our books down. That's causing this disorganized attachment as well. And we form these attachments with everyone as we grow up, and as we've shared, they play out again in that story as an adult. But in a disorganized attachment style, you see these push-pull dynamics. So the maybe, maybe not, yes and no's. There's the conflict of wanting to be needy and close to someone, but then also wanting your distance. And you might have difficulty trusting safety at all.
Mm.
So that's a really big attachment style too to also look at. And sadly, our attachment style is a reflection of our unresolved trauma. I'm not a therapist and I'm not an expert, but I have been to therapy, and I really recommend that if this does touch you in certain ways and you feel open to it, it's a really good step to go on that hard journey and find a therapist, but also start to peel off these layers so that you can form the right relationships and the relationships you truly desire.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that going through the layers of these four attachment theories that we have and attachment styles that we have is going to help us to understand, to forgive, and to be compassionate about our own journeys and understand why we relate to certain kind of mirrors of our parents, and we repeat the pattern many times. So the most important part is that these attachment styles are not personality traits. They are learned survival strategies. So that means that they can be changed and they can be restructured. So those are the good news, which what was learned in relationship, they can be healed in relationship. So we need to start um, creating, designing, envisioning a different kind of relationship where we can have uh, a different self, a different healed self, where we can relate to others in a much different way and in a way that we would have loved to have this parenting structure. Yeah.
And that relationship starts with the relationship you have with yourself, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, this last segment of our podcast, we're going to talk a bit more about the healing part of healing mother and father wounds. Lots of therapists always talk about what they are and how they manifest in the difficult side of it, but it's, I believe it's important to look at the positive side. How can we overcome them and make sure that we are not living out these patterns that aren't comfortable in our lives, or that don't bring us that fulfillment, joy, and happiness that we deserve. So, by recognizing our attachment style and realizing that you could be anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, we can see that those behaviors were an intelligent survival strategy when we grew up for our inner child to stay safe. But by recognizing that now, we can heal from a place of compassion instead of shame. Because it can feel shameful that we are acting out in these childish ways and we are repeating these,
Mm.
yeah, toxic patterns that we would like to let go of and not repeat. I know many people who don't want to reparent like their parents and promise they'll do the opposite and end up turning out to do the same. And that brings up this feeling of discomfort and shame. But as we know today, it's no fault of your own. It's our attachment style that are causing these disruptions in our lives, and we can begin healing them. We've mentioned today that healing the wounds, it might start with blaming your parents, but over time it brings that forgiveness. And we've shown awareness that it wasn't our parents' fault. They also went through difficult times growing up as well. But we must name what we didn't receive. So healing is about recognizing those unmet needs and now asking ourselves to tend to them. So can you give yourself that tender, loving care, the TLC you need, and start
Mm.
looking at what needs are you constantly trying to get met outside of yourself, and how we can revert that inwards and give them to ourselves.
Mm.
So well done. You've been listening today. So you've already started the first steps of healing, and I've already let you know that awareness is one of these first steps.
Yeah, exactly. So now we are going to shift to moving from blame to understanding. And that doesn't mean dismissing your pain or minimizing what you went through or pretending it didn't matter. Your experience matters, that's full stop, but understanding asks us to widen the lens, to open up, and to invite us to consider the ancestral load our parents were carrying, the emotional weight, the unresolved trauma, the patterns they inherited and never had the tools to heal. Many of our parents didn't grow up with emotional safety, secure attachment, or language for their inner world. Some live through multiple crises, some experience wars, displacement, poverty, or the chronic stress of survival, and others were shaped by systems that taught them to suppress emotion rather than process it. And all of that impacts how love gets expressed. So the exercise that I suggested before, speak with your parents if they are alive, speaks with your grandparents if they are alive, ask questions, ask what happened, how they grow up, how they were as a child as well, so that you can understand their own story.
Yeah, it's definitely a good exercise. I agree. But part of this journey is also realizing what love truly is. And I think that's what we feel as a child, that we want to be loved in this particular way. And when we're not being loved in that way, with our needs not being met, then we are associating that as well with love, when love is having our needs met and we can do that ourselves. So even though our parents loved us in the way that they could, they can't love us totally due to their circumstance. So this is a chance to learn what real love is and how you can really give that real love to yourself, being honest, trusting, open, vulnerable, valuing yourself, knowing that you're worthy. But part of this story is all about remembering that even though our parents did love us, their harmful behavior at times was not okay. Yet we can understand that much of what we received isn't personal and it was a pattern in our lives. So, this shift, as you mentioned, from blame to understanding, David, is where, for me, the power came, because
Mm.
instead of being tethered to the past and blaming my parents for what they did, this new understanding allowed me to step into this new future where I can make those new choices from this place of awareness. So, to heal, as we mentioned, it doesn't require you to have perfect parents. It requires us to be conscious adults.
Mm.
So, really being conscious involves being aware of our attachment styles and pausing and reflecting on our different behaviors when we see them come up. But remember, every time you choose that awareness and compassion for yourself and responsibility for your behaviors, you're not just healing yourself, you're interrupting cycles that could be running through your family for generations. So you are disrupting your lineage.
And this brings me to this going to the process of helping to depersonalize the trauma, making relationships with family and partners less reactive and more compassionate. And when we understand that we are human beings, we are going to have mistakes, we are going to argue in a relationship, and probably if you are parents, it's okay to argue in front of your child, but it's more than okay to reconciliate with your partner and show your children that a discussion or an argument doesn't mean that you are dysfunctional. It just means that you are human and that you can have these difference of opinions and how to handle them and how to understand them, because um, hiding yourself from your children and not showing them that you have some certain kind of conflicts just doesn't give them the strategies and the way that they can develop to understand that they will have this discussions and these arguments, and they don't know, they won't have tools, and they will create or believe that they are going to find the perfect person, or the half orange, or whatever it is called. And that's not real. So this is where reparenting comes, as reparenting the complete path to freedom. Healing the mother and father wounds means to stop waiting for your parents to change and start becoming the parent your nervous system never had, someone who is consistent, attuned, and safe.
Yeah, I like what you said, David. Reparenting is that complete path to freedom because this is where we can give us that love that we truly deserve and desire, and we can give it to ourselves by ourselves, and it's free and magical and miraculous. So
Mhm.
it's really a great way to finish this episode where we will look at the three core ways we can begin to reparent ourselves. And these can also be synthesized into our three important tips where you can live a happy, healthy, and holistic life by attracting the nurturing, supportive relationships we desire. The first thing that we could do is prioritize your regulation before you reflect. So before we analyze our behavior and our attachment styles or judge ourselves, before you read or watch a video on attachment styles and get into it, we must regulate ourselves. And the reason that this is so important is because we learned our inner child needs safety first, right? More than our insight and understanding. So we need to definitely regulate. And a good way of regulating ourselves to get into the state of reparenting ourselves is using our breath. You could slowly exhale, a long breath out. Have a hand on your chest. You could do a moment of grounding. And when the body feels safer, then when you reflect and analyze, the pattern can also soften a bit more on its own, and you can be a bit more open to making a new choice to change it.
Mhm. Thank you, Amy, for that first holistic tip. And the second one is implementing boundaries with others and yourself as self protection, not as punishment. So, if you grew up anxious or avoidant, boundaries may feel threatening, like rejection or abandonment. But every time you set a boundary, you are actually telling your inner child, I will not abandon you to keep someone else comfortable. So, boundaries are one of the most powerful forms of reparenting we have. It also is part of respecting ourselves, seeing our value, and honoring our self worth. And it's also something that I think shows us a deep love for who you are, and also gives you this identity compass, so that you understand that you are this kind of person right now and you deserve a different kind of treatment and a different kind of life. So focus on the micro moments in relationships when triggered, instead of lashing out, similar to a child's reaction. Pause and ask, what does my younger self need right now? Then set a boundary and share what you need. This breaks the cycle of trauma and creates a new legacy of secure attachment. And this is extremely important because there is always an underlying need when you are angry, or when you are fearful, or when you are, let's say, uh, sad. Something is behind that layer of that emotion. And when you get to that layer, you really can express it, and people can really understand and be more compassionate with you.
Yeah, I like your second one, David, too, because I've been scared of setting boundaries as an adult, as I was scared to be judged or screamed at, a bit like how I experienced when I set boundaries growing up. And I didn't always have my boundaries respected, so it felt really difficult to share that difficult vulnerability. But I learned in therapy and along the way that by not sharing your boundary, you're sacrificing yourself. You're literally sacrificing your own need by not sharing that boundary by pleasing someone else. So I decided to experiment and set some boundaries, and honestly, they were easy. People understood. It was effortless. I just had hold on to that idea that no one would ever understand me or respect my boundary growing up, that I didn't know how to set them. So obviously, it might not always go right on the first go, but these are practices, and we practice with different tones and different gestures and different words and different people. And you'll realize that people who don't like you setting boundaries are probably people you don't want to be around anyway. So it also highlights that as well. So that leads me to the third holistic tip of reparenting yourself this week, which is you need to repair this inner dialogue and how we speak to ourselves. So we
Mm.
should pay attention to what words we say to ourselves when we're triggered. Is the voice rushed? Is it critical? Is it dismissive? Or does it give us the deadly silence?
Mhm.
These voices are often echoes of our parents and the past. But healing happens when we begin to rewire these voices and respond to us in a way that a healthy parent would, with a calm, firm, but reassuring voice. It doesn't need to be dramatic or shaming, just having loving presence. And I also listened to a podcast where a woman journaled every day for a period of time, a love letter, as if she was her own mother and as if she was her own father, and wrote these letters to her every day. And it was a really big healing journey for herself, but with so much transformational benefits on the other side. So if you're into journaling, you could journal as if you are your father or your mother, sharing all the things you wish you heard and that need to be said to you, meeting your needs. But another type of strategy is reframing also this voice in our head. So if you do notice an anxious or avoidant pattern coming up in your mind and your body with your relationship, you could also ask yourself, how old does this part of me feel right now? You might get transported back into your teenage years or your early childhood. But from the age you are today, as an adult, as a person that can reparent yourself, you could say in a compassionate way, I see you. I know you're here. And I've got this now. It's all going to be okay. You don't need to worry.
Mhm.
So, yes, next time you find yourself in a state of worry or chaos, see what words could come up if you were going to be more caring and loving. I know when I make mistakes, I used to be really critical. If I smashed something on the floor again, I would swear and be annoyed with myself. But now I just say to myself, oh, that's a development. And that's it. It's neutral. That's a development. And then I just go and clean it. Well, it added to my day, a development to my day that I wasn't expecting. So you can find little things to reparent yourself that just sort of neutralize or even make it more calming and loving the response and reaction you have to certain habits. But it is really important you notice it when it happens and then see what other words could work for you.
Mhm. Thank you for that beautiful reflection, Amy. And I think that that is the most important thing, that we create this observer effect, that we are now the adult, that we are now the one that can forgive mistakes, that we are now in control of what happens in the new dialogue that we want to reprogram in our mind, and we can have a different kind of um, setting, a different kind of a scenery. We can have a different song, and that means that you can create affirmations for yourself and start replaying them so that you create this dialogue that you want. And healing the mother and father wound isn't about becoming hyper independent or never needing anyone. It's about becoming safe in connection with yourself and others. And every time you choose awareness over self attack, you are already rewriting the story.
Absolutely. So let this be the big takeaway that reparenting ourselves is a great application that you can use practically for emotional healing. As I said, it's free, easily accessible. The only person who needs to know about it and acknowledge it is yourself. And instead of seeking this external outside validation to fill the void, we finally validate our own feelings, we set boundaries, and we can soothe our own inner child during conflict with those kind and loving affirmations. So, thank you, everyone. This has been a really enlightening podcast, and I'm looking forward as well to next week's topic already.
Yeah, and we are going deep into this love and relationship section because it's the month of love, let's say. So the next episode on our podcast, so that you can stay tuned with us, it's gonna be charm, it's gonna be confusing probably, and it's gonna be about control. So it's gonna be healing from narcissistic parents and lovers. So it's gonna be another big podcast and topic. We are going to explore the lasting impact of narcissistic relationships, whether it was a parent, a partner, or someone who shaped your sense of self. You will learn how these patterns form, why they keep us stuck, and practical steps to reclaim your identity, the boundaries that you need to have, or the dismissiveness that you perform, or unseen by someone close. So, this episode is your guide to learning red flags and breaking free.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds really exciting, David.
Mhm.
Definitely something that's come up a lot in my own relationships. So I'll be interested to learn more and explore that with you next time. But yes, please follow us. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn as the Holistic Academy. We're also on Spotify with our podcast and Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. So it'll be lovely to see some of you there. Send us your comments, anything that stood out. And we'd love to announce that we're hosting our first monthly masterclass at the end of this month on Friday, the 27th of February. This is going to be how to start your wellness journey for planning a healthy year. For this
Mm.
month, we're going to cover our basic needs and how to live well. What are our basic needs?
Mhm.
Nutrition and how it can be made simple. What does that look like? We're going to look at how eating slower can also help us absorb our nutrients and whether you have hunger or anxiety eating patterns. We're going to delve deep into those and look at how we can heal some of that. We're going to talk about our ancient herbal remedies and wisdom and a bit of modern science to match that, of course. But this is a lovely offering for you and your family and your friends to feel healthier, happier, and more whole in 2026. So if you would like to get some more information, then do let us know. It's going to be £10 per masterclass for the year each month, and there are some discounts that are shown on Facebook and LinkedIn. So be sure to check them out. Until then, take care and have a beautiful, beautiful evening. Bye.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for everyone listening to us. And remember to rate us, to subscribe to our channels, and please enroll into this class because this is gonna enlighten your journey into the wellness aspect and let you know how to start discovering your true power.
Mm.
Bye.